Day. Oh my gosh. I thought yesterday was Wednesday all day long. All day. Good morning. Welcome to the morning show. How are we feeling? Happy new moon in Taurus. Oh my goodness. This is a very magical new moon. So I'm very, very excited to dive in. How are you feeling? Welcome to the morning show. This is your daily dose of inspiration where you come to level up into your highest being. I'm your host, Marli Ansel, at Marli Ansel on the Instagrams. And we're here because there is so much to talk about. Is this why I woke up confused? Possibly. So we're going to talk about the Taurus new moon today. We're going to talk about what it represents. And we're going to talk about what's coming because it's good vibes. It's good vibes. Praise the Jesus and hallelujah. So how are you feeling this morning? Nancy says I woke up feeling confused. So I'll tell you this. Taurus is the energy of the material. It's like the earthiest of the earth signs. It is all about material success. A lot of times people who have strong Taurus in their chart are very successful. It's very easy for them to acquire material wealth. But Taurus is about foundational stability and building. Let's go. I don't know how you are right now, but I am currently in the vibe of like, let's build the foundation. Let's make it strong and stable. We have to have that steady, sturdy ground for the empire that we're going to build, right? So I'm excited about this energy. Now, in talking about, is this why I was confused last night or why I woke up confused this morning? Last night, as I was going to sleep and I was setting my new moon intentions because the moon went into Taurus at 11:22 p.m. last night. So last night, as I was setting my intentions, I saw it, the visual I received was like this archway, like a doorway. And that with this new moon, it is a literal stepping through to initiate a new chapter, a new level. Everything that you have been, here's the this is it. So think about this. When you lay a foundation, you have to dig into the ground first, right? You have to go down deep into the ground to put in the stability for the empire, the building to be built up on. So there is a season of going down into the darkness. Amen. There's a season of excavating. There's a season of digging stuff up. You got to get the instability out of the way. And then you've got to purposefully implant stability so that you can build something strong on it. So everything that you've been working on, now you tell me if this is true for you. It's very true for me. Everything that you've been going into the depths on, doing that healing work, looking at what's not working, going to yesterday's episode where we talked about Pluto comes in and it Jenga tower knocks over the stuff that was built by the ego. You've been excavating. You've been getting rid of the things that cannot live. They cannot go forward with you. There's a season for that. And now with this Taurus new moon, the vibe that I get is that the foundation is complete. Let's build. Let's build. Now it's about building that new level. Now it's about stepping fully into this next chapter, severing the ties of anything that was from the past. I have received this message over and over and over and over and over and over and over again in the last week. The past is done. Stop looking back. Only forward. Cut ties to the past. Only forward. Stop looking backward. Only forward. Over and over and over in a bajillion different ways, this message has come in different sayings, but essentially it's all saying the past is complete. Stop looking back. It's time to move forward. Now think about the significance of that in terms of when you're excavating and you're digging down into the darkness, you're digging into the hole, you are essentially needing to look back. You're needing to look at the past. You're needing to go, okay, what of the past needs to be uprooted, needs to be let go. This is one of the essential teachings that I teach you all who have been in or who choose to come into it in the future in the spiritual coach training program, uprooting is it's step one. We have to go and uproot what can no longer come with us. Same metaphor as when we garden. You can't plant the new on top of all the weeds. We have to go in and excavate. We have to pull out what cannot live anymore. So, in your season of excavating, uprooting, which is entirely necessary, you are looking backward, right? We're looking at the past traumas. We're looking at past lives, even the things that need to be healed, the things that need to be acknowledged, the things that need to be let go. We're looking back for a season. And what I have been getting in the messaging over and over and over in this last week is that the past is done. Only look forward now. Only look forward now. Like, you did it. You did it. There's no more uprooting that needs to be done. There's no more excavating that needs to be done. It is now time to move forward. And so this is what this Taurus new moon really feels like to me. It's like time to build. Time to build. What does that next level look like? What does that next chapter look like? Now it's about that forward creation movement. And I just feel very like, I'm excited. I'm excited because if any of you have ever gone through, you let me know in the comments. Nancy said literally all my thoughts at 3 a.m. Let me know in the comments. If you have ever been, which we all have. If you've ever been through a dark night of the soul, a season where the dark clouds ascended upon you and you had to really go inward to do some healing work, where you went through a season where God, the universe, basically said, like, no more. You're not going any further in this exact same vibration. You need to change your tune. You need to update. You need to upgrade. If you've ever gone through a season like that, it's tough. It's tough. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard. The emotional healing is hard. Chris said, oh my God, so many times, right? It's like this perpetual death and rebirth cycle that we're in. But I believe that everyone goes through one really big one. You know what I mean? I believe everyone goes through one really significant dark night of the soul. And then once we move through that big one, from there, it's like these little tune-ups, little cleanups. That part of me's got to go. We've got to rebirth it over here. We've got to let go of that past. We've got to plant new seeds here. So the way that I teach this and I describe the dark night of the soul is in terms of identity shedding. Identity shedding is essentially letting go of a past version of you. Now, it can feel very difficult because a lot of times we're very attached to these past versions of ourselves. So when we go through a dark night of the soul, which is a season of change, essentially it's a season of God and the universal timeline saying that season of life is complete. You can't stay here anymore. You have to move forward. And depending where we are internally with our own personal strength and confidence and power and knowing who we are, that can be really difficult if we've been very attached to these external definitions of who we are. So when life starts getting chaotic and things start getting ripped away from you, if you have not built that internal foundation, that's really difficult. It's really difficult, even when you have been doing the work. When things start shifting and changing and rearranging in a way that you did not plan, that's a little daunting. But what I will say with it is it's entirely necessary. Because, I'm going to explain this in the best way that I know how. I believe, getting the whiteboard out for this, I believe that we go through seasons of life where we have timelines that we are meant to walk. But each timeline has a beginning and an end point. And when that timeline is meant to end, we have to move forward to the next timeline. So in my beautiful little drawing here, so I want you to see this as like, here's you, and here's your first chapter of life, right? You've got your first season of life. Think back on your life. Just think back on your life. How many different lives have you lived? Just this lifetime. How many different versions of you have existed? So many, right? There's chapters of my life that I think back on now and I'm like, that happened? Like, that was part of my existence because it seems so foreign to the timeline that I'm in now. So you're going through your season of life here. And once you hit this point, if you are not intentionally leveling up, intentionally moving forward, intentionally being proactive to set forth on the new timeline of life, life starts getting real chaotic because you essentially have hit a wall. And when you hit that wall, there's no forward. So you're like, this is you. This is you. When you refuse to do the things that you know that you're supposed to do, you're like, boom. And then you like bump back. And then you're like, boom. And then you bump back. And you're like, boom. Why is this not working? Why is this not working? Why is this not? Right? Life gets difficult. Life gets hard. So this timeline essentially is saying, chapter closed, done. You cannot push forward on this same timeline anymore. Now, if we're in a position where we're like, cool, like, I'm good. I'm not attached to this timeline of life. I'm good with moving into a new chapter. I know who I am. I know no matter where I go, I take me with me. So I'm okay with initiating a new chapter. Then you can pretty easily go into the next one. But when we're really attached to this version of ourselves and this timeline of life, that's when you start hitting that head up against the wall over and over and over again, and life gets really difficult and hard. And so with the dark night of the soul, you're essentially shedding that past version of yourself. You're letting go of that past version of yourself and all of the things that came with it. And that can be really, really difficult for us when we're super attached because there's things like there's lessons, there's wounding, there's trauma, there's belief systems, there's all of this stuff that goes with that version of you that's now being let go. And if you have any attachment to that story, needing that story in order to whatever, then that time period gets really, really difficult and hard. Surrender is the name of the game. It's, can I let it go? But letting it go to the ego feels like ultimate fear, ultimate death. I've told you guys this before. When I was really in it, like really in it, I recall sitting on the couch feeling so much fear in my body, like just belly, like fear, that feeling. No idea what I was afraid of. Like, there was no real story of fear, but my body was freaking out. And this was a time period when I had just moved in with Robert, just became a stepmom. Literally, my entire life was changing. Like, this chapter of single, independent Marli doing her thing, not a care in the world, was ending. And I was stepping into a new timeline of eventually going on to get married, become a stepmom, entirely uprooted my old existence. And I was very attached, okay, very attached to single, independent Marli because I had fought for her so hard. And this is how it happens. Like, it's all in good intention. Do you know what I mean? Like, I worked so hard, so like, I can feel the tears. Oh my God, we're not going to cry in the morning. I worked so hard to build that version of me that, like, I've got me independent, powerful, confident. Like, I worked so hard to get to where I was. So when that chapter of life and that identity was essentially ending, and it's not like you don't lose the good, it integrates into something more. But when you're going through it, it just feels scary. It doesn't feel like I'm integrating into something more. It feels like you're asking me to let go of who I am. You see what I'm saying? And so it was a difficult time. And it was a surprising difficult time because in my mind, I was like, oh my God, life's amazing. Got this amazing man. Look at these two children that I didn't have to birth out of my body. Like, business was good. Like, life was good factually. But inside, I was like dying, essentially, identity, death, and rebirth. So you go through it when you're attached. Chris said, I feel like you're speaking to me this morning. Every morning I feel so much fear and nothing is wrong other than I'm stepping up and stepping out in new ways. It's so uncomfortable. Exactly. Exactly. It's such a real thing. And I really try. I've got to do a better job because I teach this so much inside the courses and inside the programs. But I've really got to do a better job of teaching it publicly because everybody goes through this. Everybody goes through this. And the problem is because there's no education on it, like, well, zero to very little, people think something's wrong with them. And there's nothing wrong with you. There's literally nothing wrong with you. You are going through a very natural process of death and rebirth. Everything in nature goes through death and rebirth. Like we see this, I mean, this is creepy and weird, but like right now in where I live, there is a flock of like billions of cicadas that are moving through our area right now. You can hear them all day long. It's like apocalypse over here. But I bring it up because we were watching a nature documentary and cicadas literally shed their entire skeletal system to birth a new version of them. We do the same thing. For us, it's just less physical. I mean, like physical does show a bit, but it's less physical and it's more of that internal shedding. It is the very process of our soul evolution. We're shedding the ego parts of us for that soul rebirth to step truly into the versions of who we actually are, the light, the love, the expansion. And in truth, we have to. Like, we have to shed these ego versions of ourselves in order to fully step into who we're meant to be. But ego's got a whole lot of fear. And I'll tell you this, like, let's get into it a little bit. Fear only exists with the ego. Fear only exists with the ego. Fear is not a real thing. There is no fear in terms of soul or light. Fear only exists in the ego. So you will feel fear when the ego feels threatened. Do you hear that? Because that was really big. You will feel fear when the ego feels threatened. But the ego feeling threatened is not a bad thing because that means we're stepping into the direction of soul. And as you step into the direction of soul, ego's like, oh shit, she's getting rid of me. Like fear, terror. You see what I'm saying? So whenever we feel that feeling of fear, our main job is to not buy into it. And I know that's a lot easier said than done because fear is so like overtaking, but that is the program. Like that's the program of polarity that we're existing in. That's the mechanism of the ego. It's meant to feel really, really strong. But the moment you start questioning it, like Chris said here, everything's fine. So the moment you start questioning the fear and you start stepping forward through it, like don't run away from it, it dissipates. I always reference it like fog. You know, if you're on one side of fog and you don't know what fog is, like that's scary. You know what I mean? You're like, I don't know what that is. That's some demon. Like, what do I do with that? But if you don't let the fear dictate what you do, you take a big, deep breath and you step forward, you find that it's very easy to walk through fog. There's nothing there that's actually harming you. There's nothing bad actually happening. And that's the game we're playing. We have to overcome ego to expand our soul, to grow in our strength, to grow in who we actually know ourselves to be. So whenever you feel fear, you just got to know like fear isn't real. I know I feel it, but fear is of the ego. And as long as I walk towards it and I don't go away from it, then I'm the one who's in control. Fear is not in control. Now, fear in your body is a very different feeling than my life is at threat. Like that's a totally different emotion. You know what I mean? Fear in the body because you thought about someone judging you for what you said is entirely different than my life is being threatened right now. So those are two totally different emotions or feelings, I should say. Nancy said if the door doesn't open, you got to kick it down. I love that. Go for it. So much easier said than done. So true. So true. So when you're in the midst of an identity shedding or a dark night of the soul, essentially, here's how I want you to see it. your identity sits in your solar plexus. That's your center of self. So when you start uprooting an old identity, like an old identity starts to leave, as in new chapter of life is beginning, this version of you is now going to exit out of your being kind of feel. I want you to picture it like the tree trunk is here in your solar plexus. Its roots are in your sacral and your root chakra. So you've been growing this version of you that's shedding out for a long time, right? Like there's been nurturing that went into it. There's been like a lot of energy put into growing this identity version of you. When it starts uprooting, like it starts to move up through the chakra system. Those roots are coming out of the root in the sacral. And as it's starting to shift its center of consciousness from your center of self up, it's going to move through the heart chakra. When it gets to the heart chakra, that is when it feels like it's overwhelming you. Everybody has felt this. You know that chapter of your life where you were just overcome with so much emotion, fear, feeling inadequate, feeling not enough. Because a lot of times when we're shedding that ego identity, what is it laced with? It is laced with not enough. It's laced with lack. It's laced with fear. And so when it moves and it gets to the heart, that's when it feels entirely overwhelming. It feels like it completely encompasses your whole life and you don't know what to do. This is the point that most people sabotage it and they start running away from it. You don't want to do that. Again, I teach this in the spiritual coach training program. I actually train coaches how to take clients through this process. But when it gets to the heart chakra and you're feeling it the most, this is the time period where you've got to realize the thing that you're feeling is what is shedding out. Most of us try to fix it. You know what I mean? When you're overcome with the feelings of fear, scarcity, lack, not enough, all of that, most of the time, what we end up trying to do is fix that feeling. And when we do that, we stop that process. It's like we attach to it, we hold it here. So anytime you try to fix, you're attaching yourself to the problem. During this process, what you want is bless and release. I am aware that I am feeling a whole lot of not enough right now. I'm aware that I am feeling a whole lot of inadequacy. I am aware that I'm feeling a whole lot of lack. I know that that's not my ultimate truth. And at this point, you have to know it because you're going to be feeling the opposite. You feel me? And so as you say, I know that that's not my ultimate truth, what you can do in your mind, this is what I do, is I see it like a big ball, like a ball of energy. Like here is past Marli moving up through the chakra system. And as I see it, I see the roots detaching, like pulling out of my body. And I'm picturing that energy ball just moving up through the chakras. In this area, heart to throat, you better believe you're going to be releasing a lot. Like you're going to be released, you're going to be crying, you're going to want to scream, you're going to want like rage out, like because it's so much energy. And as it hits the throat is our chakra of expression. This is where it's going to start doing all of its releasing. As you get to the throat though, you're practically there. So it's so ironic. The irony is the moment when you're crying the most is when you're almost at the finish line. Like the darkest part of the night, right before the dawn, the part where you're feeling the most, you are almost there at the finish line because that identity is moving out of the heart and into the throat. And once you are into the throat and you just, this is why you hear me all the time saying, do not suppress your emotions. Do not suppress your emotions because you're keeping yourself stuck when you suppress your emotions. Let them out. Let them out with a vengeance. Don't like rage on a person or anything, but like rage on a pillow, scream, punch the pillow, cry, whatever you've got to do. Get them out. Breath work is good for this because breath work is such a invigoration of spinning all the chakras. Once you get past that point, It has officially released from the lower chakras. And now you're going to hit this point where it's right here at the third eye. This is the day that I call like surrender day, because once it's here, it's like really cloudy. You've had these days. You've had, like, I have lived and taught this process so many times. I know it like clockwork, and every single human has experienced this. When it's here, this is that day where you just can't. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't think, you don't even remember what happened 30 minutes ago. You're like, meh, like I just can't. Like, I can't plan. I can't do any work. At my best, I'm gonna sit on the couch and watch like a reality show. like like it's a surrender day entirely. Again, this is where some people will sabotage because they think something's wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with you. When you have a day like that, surrender to it. I've come to love those days because I'm such a like productivity, let's get shit done kind of girl. The days where I just can't, I'm like, great, great. I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm not doing nothing. I'm going to fully enjoy this. I'm going to do, just relax, nurture, take care of myself. If you embrace it, it will be gone in a day. I guarantee you. If you embrace it, it will be gone in a day. If you fight against it, you're going to prolong it. So embrace it. Embrace it. Don't let it freak you out. It is literally those days where your brain is like, I can't. I just can't. I cannot. Embrace it. I promise you, like 1,000% promise you, if you embrace it, the next day, that identity is right out of your crown chakra, and you will feel like a brand new human. You will feel like a brand new human. I am no lie. So the process and the length of it is kind of entirely up to you. But the majority of where people prolong it is here in the heart, because we attach. We attach to who we think we are. We attach to what we think we're supposed to be. And then we feel all those emotions, and then we try to fix those emotions instead of just allowing them to release and move through us. And so we end up in this repeating pattern, which compounds our dark night of the soul, which just makes it darker and darker and darker until what? Until you let it go. Everything comes back to surrender. You can either voluntarily surrender or you will be forced into surrender, but everything comes back to surrender. So the moment that you can let go of all of your attachments, it will move through very easily. But if I'm attached, then I'm the one who's keeping it prolonged. Do you see what I'm saying? So all of that is to say is that these dark nights of the soul, while they are very difficult, there's just no sugarcoating that. Like, they're tough. They're tough. And they can extend for a long time period if you're super attached. They really can. They have so much purpose. And as we learn to detach and let it go, we're gonna emerge as that next beautiful version of ourselves. And we're gonna go, why did I ever attach for so long? It's like the caterpillar resisting the chrysalis and then finally surrendering to it and coming out on the other side as a butterfly, and he's flying and he's like, oh my God, what was my problem? I was going to stay on the ground the rest of my life. What was I thinking? Right? But in that process of dissolving into goop, terrifying, because you're losing who you thought you were to be reborn into who you're meant to be. And it's a beautiful process. And if you really go for it, you really get to fully step into that highest potentiality of who you're meant to be on this earth. And to me, that's the most exciting thing in the world. Like, all I want in life is to fully exercise my whole potential. Like, I want to do it all. And so I am willing to go through that muck. I'm willing to go through that like heavy, because I want to get to that. I want to do everything that I came here to do. And I know that I cannot do everything I came here to do while holding on to limitation, while holding on to fear, holding on to these old lack scarcity belief systems. And so there's a lot of healing that comes in with that, right? Because we've got our conditioned programming from the world. We have our conditioned coding from our parents, from our society we grew up in. There's a lot of healing and releasing and detaching and letting go that is part of the process. But if we can understand it, which is why I come on here and try to teach as much as I can, if we can understand what's happening, it does help a lot for us to walk through that process, because we're not sitting there going, something's wrong with me. I'm depressed. I have anxiety. I need medication. Medication ain't helping your evolution. So I do try to come and teach as much as I possibly can. Nancy said, I'm lost all morning doing weird things. Yep, surrender. And you know what really helps? Like, just laugh at yourself as much as you can. Do you know what I mean? Like, we take this whole life thing so seriously. Laugh at yourself as much as you can. Like, if you walk into a room and you're like, why did I come in here? Like, laugh, because what you feel in a day is temporary. This is not permanent. It's when we start worrying and thinking something's wrong with me that we start compounding those feelings and then entrapping ourselves. Like, nothing is permanent. Everything is malleable, everything moves. But if we start fearing what's happening, then we start stalling, contracting, and we create our own prison. So we just gotta like laugh at it. Like, oh my God, I'm having a day. Cannot. Like, I cannot today. I can't think past the next second. I don't remember yesterday. Like, I'm surrendering. I'm having a third eye up level day. Just let it go. Because as you do that and you lighten it up, there's a reason that we have all of these terms, like lighten it up or it feels heavy. Like, it all comes back to the density of vibration. A light vibration is a moving, malleable vibration. A heavy vibration is the dense, like, doesn't move, constricted. Like, we have it in our language all day long. We just say it so often that we don't actually ever think about the origin of that language. Like, why do we say my gut instinct? Because it's your intuitive brain that's living in your sacral, like my gut instinct. Or I felt gutted. Like, when something goes against what you felt like was right, you feel gutted. Like, it's in our language. Like, our language is language of the soul. We've just layered on with ego density so much that we don't recognize it anymore. Chris said, I'm so grateful for this show every morning. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I'll share this quick story before we wrap up. Showing up matters. Like, showing up matters a lot. And this is something that's always been top of mind for me. But just yesterday, I'm going to tell you a story. Just yesterday, I had something happen that really reiterated to me, like, how important it is to just show up. If you feel called in some way, whatever it is, and it's more than just showing up on the internet, like showing up to your kid's school function thing, showing up to support your friend, showing up for your mom, showing up for your partner, like, just showing up. There's so much power in just showing up. But in particular, if you have a calling where you feel like I feel like I'm called to teach, speak, share, you have a calling, just showing up for that calling is so important. Like, it's just so important. And then in terms of business, showing up really matters. So, in example, what happened yesterday, I'm on this girl's email list that is about like content creation. And every Tuesday she does this content and coffee or something like that. And yesterday, for the first, like, I've been on her email list for probably 6 months. Yesterday was the first time where I was like, oh, I'm going to go. I'm going to go to her content and coffee thing. I've got these new ideas for some content I want to make. Like, let's see how she does it. Let's get her insight. 5 minutes before, like, I put it in my calendar and everything. 5 minutes before, she cancels the content and coffee. And I was like, oh. So I've been on this girl's email list for 6 months. And the day that I finally decide I'm going to go and listen, she randomly cancels it. Well, that's it for me. Like, this was the day I was going to show up, and then you cancel last minute. So bye. Like, I'm not going to go to your thing anymore. Right. So that's practical. That's like so simplistic. The power of showing up. You don't know Who needs your message that day? That day specifically. Out of 6 months of being on her list, I finally decided I'm going to go to her thing, and she cancels. Like, you don't know who's planning to show up that day. You don't know who needs your words that day. You don't know who needs to hear your message. So like, just show up, you know? And that's not to say like don't honor your body. I don't know what she had going on with her, you know, like it could be something silly all the way to something dramatic. I don't know. But what I am saying is, to the best of your ability, show up for your calling, show up to do what you said you were going to do, because you just don't know who's counting on it. You know, like you don't know, like I feel some type of way all the time. Like all the time. I'm not a morning person. If it was up to me, I would be sleeping like 10 hours a day, but I'm also a night owl and I can't sleep until 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. So I don't always feel like showing up. It's the truth. I don't always feel like showing up. But the way that I have kind of hacked my system is, if I schedule it and I plan it, I'm going to be there. Like, I'm going to be there. If I scheduled it and I planned it, regardless of how I feel, I'm going to do it, you know? Aside from like something crazy that happens, you know? But here's the thing, because I show up like 98% of the times when something does actually happen where I need to reschedule or I'm not going to be there, my people, my students and clients give me so much grace for that, because it's not typical. You know what I mean? So show up. Like, it's the most underestimated strategy in the world. Like, just showing up automatically puts you as a leader because you're choosing to show up. Nobody's making you do it. You're leading yourself, choosing to show up. So it automatically puts you in a leadership position because you're just showing up. Shoot. Underrated strategy. That's part of the magic of humans. I love that. All right, my loves. Well, that was a really awesome, in-depth, deep conversation. Do me a favor. Please share this one. In particular, share this live about the identity shedding and the dark night of the soul. I want to get this message out to more people. Like I said, I teach it in my programs. I teach it behind the scenes. But I want to start teaching it more publicly because it's just such an important topic that people need to know about, especially if they're going through it. So if this resonated with you, please share the show. Share it with somebody who you think it would really, really help. And it helps us to get our message out there to the world. Okay. I love you guys. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, May 9th, for another episode of The Morning Show. I love you so much. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Mwah, mwah, mwah. And I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.